Okay, welcome to Script Camp's one-off class on contained genre movies. In today's event, we're going to be looking at the elements that go into making a really clear, beautiful, high-concept pitch for a movie in terms of the walls and boundaries of the story, the rules, the protagonist, the character arc, and everything that goes into crafting that really great logline or that pitch that is going to help sell the idea or, at least get you to the point where you can either if you get hired to write the idea, then that's always the ideal scenario. But other different things can happen too. For instance, you might be able to sell just the concept. You won't get a written by credit; you would just get a story by credit. But like the thing with a great pitch is that you can do a lot with it, even if you don't end up being the one to ultimately have the written by at the end of the day. So we'll talk about some of those different opportunities and options and possibilities here. Obviously, right now in Hollywood, we are in a very tough spot, so it's not always easy to sell something nowadays. So this is all about kind of maximizing your chances to do that. We are in a stage-style channel here on Discord, so that means you do have to click that request to speak button by clicking that hand icon if you want to speak aloud and be heard, but otherwise you can use the text chat by mousing over the Classroom channel on the left-hand side of your Discord window and clicking that white word bubble that says Open Chat. We are Script Camp, which is a server in the Skill Camp family of servers, which is our nonprofit that offers free and low-cost classes to help learn new skills to reach your life goals. We have lots of writing classes on Script Camp and Word Camp, which are focused on writing for the screen and novels, but we have other servers, other classes, and other groups too. Some are free and open to everybody, and some are for our supporting members, like the boot camps and labs, which take you all the way from idea to finished draft of a script in just 6 weeks for a TV pilot, 8 weeks for a feature, and we have a 90-day novel course as well. I've been writing full-length scripts for 12 years, moved to LA in 2015, and got signed for the first time in 2017. Mostly specializing in horror, thriller, and action movies. I've set up a bunch of movies at this point in various stages in Hollywood. None have actually gotten to that production benchmark yet. None of them have actually come out, but in any case have taken lots of meetings, done a lot of development, and this past couple weeks I've been doing a lot of pitching, a lot of writing one-sheets, a lot of coming up with ideas in these same sort of genres. So I figured this would be a great class to sort of share something that I'm actively working on at the moment rather than just theoretical. This will be focused on the nitty-gritty day-to-day of this action horror thriller kind of writing stuff. We call this like genre writing typically. Genre is like a pretty broad term because everything's a genre, but like when people say genre in Hollywood, they're almost always referring to horror, thriller, action, and sci-fi, and basically the stuff that's not comedy, drama, or dramedy. Let's take a quick glance at the upcoming schedule too. We have lots of classes, events, boot camps, and labs, including a couple new ones coming up on Code Camp, UI Design, and Discord bots on the 25th of July and 29th. I'm seeing some comments in the chat maybe for cutting out for some. My stream is cutting out for someone. If that's true, let me know. Somebody else says it's all good, so I'm not sure. Maybe it's a user's connection. We have 3 different boot camps running on Script Camp at any time. That's going to be your pilot boot camp that runs for 6 weeks. We have one that just started that's running Fridays, 6 to 8 p.m. These are all Pacific time. We have feature boot camp that runs 8 weeks. New session starts next week. And if you come back next week, then we will be working on pitches today or like ideas for movies today that you can come back and sort of present next week if you want. You can, let me bring up the slide on that. So we will be coming back next Sunday to sort of, you'll like come up with the basics of the idea today and work on it, and then try to zero down to the ones that you think are the best, and next week try to come back with a full log line and be ready to just pitch the basics of what the movie would be. You don't have to write a full plot for it. So we wanted to take a glance at the, let me come back here, upcoming schedule. So we have lots of things happening on a weekly basis. We have weekly groups such as Mystery and Crime Writers Group that meets on Wednesdays. We have Sci-Fi Group. We have Advanced Fiction Lab. We have all kinds of great stuff that you can see on this sheet here. And we also are adding new stuff all the time. So we have a lot of volunteers who run events on their own. So if you're interested in running something like this, then you can totally join our community and participate in that way. And we are available, like we have most of these things free and open to the public, and then we have our boot camps and our advanced courses like that. Those are going to be for our supporting members. So make sure you do sign up at scriptcamp.net if you're at all interested in doing more stuff like this and going beyond just the first couple weeks. You can get access to every boot camp and lab on every server by signing up for unlimited membership, and you will save 40% by subscribing yearly. Okay, that's a bit about Script Camp. Let's look at the overview for the upcoming course. So this is kind of technically attached to the feature bootcamp. This is like your week 0 for this upcoming feature bootcamp, but we'll be doing that fun pitching stuff, log lines next week, July 7th. All of these are Sundays from 11 to 1. When we will be doing a class on one-sheets as well. So crash course on writing one-sheets on the 14th. This is also something I'm doing a lot of right now. It's sort of the next step after you have that really rock-solid pitch and logline, is to come up with basically just a one-page version of the movie story. You can see everything else that's coming up here on this list. I won't go over it. We have so much to get to today. We're going to be looking at contained stories in the horror, thriller, and action genres. Our topics are going to start with originality and just the freshness of these concepts, that we're trying to write stuff that has not been written exactly like that before, not in that exact same setting or in that exact same way. We'll look at the box, which is sort of the containment, the containment unit that your story takes place in, whether it's a house, a laboratory, a dungeon, a prison, or something like this. These contained environments really add to that sellability factor and the ability for people to make these things on a lower budget. Walls and games, so the ways that we can sort of exploit the settings that we've chosen for maximum possible fun. The problem, which is the opponent, antagonist, sometimes which makes up the bit, is like really important to start with in terms of like horror, for instance, where the hook is the threat. In action, for instance, the hook is not necessarily the threat, so you approach that problem in a different way. Conceits, character arcs, and last we'll have practice, so lots of time to come up with a bunch of ideas at the end. Okay, so let's just dive right in because we've got so much to talk about. So we're talking horror, thriller, and action. These are seen as more producible. Well, let's start with just horror and thriller. So horror and thriller are often seen as this kind of gateway entry point into filmmaking, writing, directing, sometimes acting, things like this, because these genres don't require a huge star in order to be financially successful. The limitations that face these genres actually kind of amplify other elements of them that tend to work well, which is cool, meaning that like the isolated rural location, for instance, adds to the creepiness of a horror story, but also makes it easier to produce. You know, isolation, desolation, or the cramped quarters, like the fact that this all takes place within one room or one house, makes it so much easier to film. We don't have to worry about day and night. They can shoot day and night and either block out the windows and shoot, you know, as if it's night. Not a big problem. That like we have full control over weather, over the sound. It's much easier just to wrangle all those things and worry less about reshoots and outside factors that are going to disrupt the making of that movie. So the smaller the box, the better, and we'll talk about different sizes of box, of course. And when it comes to action, today we'll mostly be focusing on contained action. I've actually really heard development executives use this word actioner recently, a contained actioner. I don't exactly know what that means or why we say that. I'm just going to say action for the most part, but there you go. It's something people say. And let's look at a couple examples. So in terms of contained thriller, Shut In, Panic Room, this is going to be thriller stories with high stakes, life and death, really intense, edge of your seat kind of thrills, but all within that one space. And the nice thing about that kind of pressure cooker of the thriller box is that, again, that amplifies and adds to the tension, having everyone stuck all together and forced to, you know, their rivalries, their problems, whatever it is, they come to a clash with each other in these contained environments. They can't escape in whatever way. In terms of horror, we have Crawl, Saw, these movies that are... I know that Saw is not entirely contained, but the majority of the story takes place in that one filthy bathroom underneath the murder mansion. And in terms of contained action, it can be kind of tough to think of these sometimes just because these are usually going to be in that lower budget space. I will say there's something about martial arts tournaments that happens to work really well in a contained environment. So if you are a martial arts writer, then now is kind of the time to be thinking of those kinds of like blood sport type ideas. If you got them, then it makes a very easy box. Okay, let's start with originality. So, does the idea have to be new and shiny and original? Pretty much, yeah, actually. Normally, I don't teach originality as mattering that much in my normal writing classes, just because we're trying to learn how to tell stories. But in talking about stuff that will sell and sell in 2024, we need to be Googling your concept, your box, your hook, whatever it is, to make sure it hasn't been done already. You might consider if it's like this little checklist, if it's been done well, recently, or in English, And if any two of those are true, then you probably want to pick a new idea. So recently and in English, well and in English, recently and well, whatever it is. If any two of those things are true, then probably pick something else. Development people are really big fans of these genres, and they watch pretty much every single thing, even the more obscure stuff. The premise doesn't have to be mind-bogglingly new. We're just looking for a few fresh elements, or even one fresh element that can make it feel kind of different. In fact, you have to pretty much be playing by the rules of your subgenre, and you're not trying to reinvent the wheel as you're trying to sell a movie. You want to make something about the situation, protagonist, antagonist, rules, environment, or central relationship feel fresh in some way. So the box itself refers to the environment of the movie. We're talking, a box can be almost any size. A person has to basically be able to fit in it, I guess, is the one rule. So tiny box is character can barely move. A coffin, a phone booth, solitary confinement, a tanning bed. Movie examples would be something, well, we mentioned phone booth, buried, O2, or fall. Although fall does take place in only exteriors, the, quote, box of the movie is basically just like this platform at the very top of a radio tower. And it's only like a few feet wide. So you can get a lot of mileage in a thriller out of a really, really well-chosen box environment for your characters to be in, even if it is unbearably, stiflingly small. Sometimes that can add to that pressure or add to the tension even more. A small box I would call a small room, like a prison cell, and we have everything from or living room or studio or something like that, right? And it's going to be, I've included a couple examples here that aren't even genre movies. Carnage and 12 Angry Men are both dramas, but you can see how all taking place within that really contained environment adds to the conflict between those characters, forces them to work out their problems, or to they have to work out their differences before they can leave those rooms. We also have ATM, Autopsy of Jane Doe, taking place in both an ATM booth, or respectively an ATM booth and a morgue. Medium box is going to be a very large room or a few linked rooms like cabins, a warehouse, a laboratory, something like that. It's going to be like your Evil Dead, which does include a multi-level cabin in that it has a cellar. So if we're going from single room to multiple stories, we're kind of in a medium box now. Vermont's Room is a cool Spanish thriller from 2008 or 9, which is about a bunch of I think they're mathematicians that are trapped in a room that is actually getting smaller and smaller, which I always thought was a really cool hook for that story, is that they're in a room that has been like a saw trap, basically, just designed to crunch them all like a garbage compactor unless they can figure out why they're there, or one of those great little mysteries that it's well, what do we all have in common, one of those type of stories. Large boxes are going to be house-sized or multi-level structures, or a few medium-sized linked areas, like a whole pediatric wing at the hospital, a small cave system, an apartment building, Rec, takes place in a bunch of apartments in one building, Hotel Artemis, Evil Dead Rise, which takes place largely in one apartment, but does go throughout the building to other parts like the parking garage. Free Fire is an action that all takes place in one warehouse, pretty much during one shootout. And then we have your huge box, which would be a whole complex or a whole mansion, the cargo ship, the military base, Ready or Not, the Raid, Dread, that takes place in a mega block kind of structure kind of thing. So you can pick any size of box that makes the most sense for your story, but in terms of production, the smaller the box, the better. If you can have the whole thing take place in a coffin, you should. And then take a step back and say, okay, it wouldn't work in a coffin. We have to expand the box a little bit. Could I do it in a small room? Could I do it in a big room? Could I do it in a whole house? And then you can always include the outside or the direct sort of the surroundings of that box to some extent. I would say a movie that I thought made great use of its box was Your Lucky Day on Netflix, which was a crime thriller from last year with Angus Cloud. Is that how you say that? And that one was all set in a convenience store, but also uses the parking lot quite well and really makes those different parts of the store feel distinct, and they have a different kind of color scheme, lighting, personality to them. Changing up the color scheme throughout the movie can be a great way to, or the light situation can be a great way to make a small box feel bigger. You'll see this in the movie Buried, which all takes place in one coffin, but throughout the movie goes through several distinct phases as his light sources kind of burn out. So he starts with a cell phone, and then he goes to a flare, then he goes to a glow stick. And so the movie does actually feel visually distinct as it goes on, and we can kind of know which part of the movie that we're in just from looking at the visuals, right? If we're all in green, if we're all in blue, if we're all in red, it does add a little bit of that sense of progress to the story, too, which is just nice. Walls and games. So the walls are the physical or perhaps mystical limits on the location, the rules which determine what can and cannot be done. The games are tactics that your character might adopt within that space, or objects, avenues, opportunities to explore and exploit for mischief within that space. Think of a big restaurant in a kitchen. A serial killer's chasing you through one. How do you fight him? Well, we've got so many options. Where do we even start in the kitchen, right? You've got the knives. There's where you usually would probably start. We've got the meat tenderizer. You've got the corkscrew. You've got everything in the drawers. Beyond that, what else do we have? We have stoves. We have deep fryers. We can douse them in oil and set them on fire. We can lock them in the freezer. What else can we do, right? Like, there's so many options in a kitchen that you can easily see. A lot of possibilities for fun and mischief there. Spice grinder, Nacho tells us, yeah, to get the red pepper flakes in the eyes. Think of your character's objective and what interesting games the box has to play with. Could a phone work there? Can the characters hack into something? What can be weaponized? Where can you hide? These are all the questions that we are wondering at the conception stage of a contained horror thriller or action. Game ideas. So, how can you manipulate the space to your advantage? How can you control or usurp control of that box? How could you kill someone? This sounds so psychopathic to say outside of this context, but like a lot of horror thriller and action movies involve life and death stakes, right? How does your I always ask questions like, how can we heist it? How can it kill you? Are immediate questions that just are very helpful in the planning stages of movies like this. How could we defend against a heist? What tools or skills or powers does our character have access to that can interact with that space in unique and interesting ways? Remember, phones are a game changer, and having a phone can completely change the movie. So you sort of see why in a lot of stories they will very quickly come up with a reason why the phones won't work or don't have reception or have been ruined or something like that, just because it would otherwise break the walls. I prefer when the phones are, personally, I prefer when they're not disabled or broken. And in certain circumstances, like calling the police just wouldn't help or nobody would believe you. Those usually work a little better for me personally. But then again, the old, it's out in the woods. There's going to be no reception for the next week. Hope you brought your crossword puzzles. Just works well. I mean, like, that just is true that some parts of the world simply don't have reception. So just don't, do the cliches. You got to watch enough of these movies to know the sort of cliched moments. Exterior boxes. These aren't really boxes in the sense that they don't always have physical walls to them. The walls might be more like we're lost, or we can't leave, or we have some objective we're trying to accomplish before we can get out of this place. In terms of horror and thriller, I think we've seen a million examples of just the woods, right? The creepy woods. And the nice thing about the woods is that it's very easy to create that spooky, uncomfortable atmosphere there, especially at night, especially in the mist and the fog and the rain and all these things. We have ocean, which can work if we are on like a small, manageable vessel. I haven't actually seen Captain Phillips, but it's my understanding that most of it takes place on that one boat. Ghost ship is a much bigger box, but still, it's like we have to defeat the ghost to leave the ship, so something about it works well. Fields, pastures, farms, we've seen lots of examples of. Space can work. I would avoid stuff set on spaceships for the most part. Gravity works pretty well. I mean, it has that kind of... It's a pretty high budget movie overall, but you could see maybe a lower budget version of Gravity that would simply take place, let's say maybe all on the exterior of the spaceship, or all while your character's drifting through the void or something like that. What else? We have deserts. Not a lot of desert ones. The movie Mine from 2016 involves a soldier that like accidentally steps on a mine and ends up stuck there because he can't get off it or it'll blow up. That worked well. There was another sort of military-themed thriller with a sniper. It's something like somebody's hiding from a sniper behind a... Does somebody remember this one? Behind like a cloth or something, like a cloth wall or like a very thin wall, and they can't leave that spot or else they get shot by the sniper. There's an English movie called Tower Block from maybe 2012-ish that I thought worked quite well. Another sort of sniper-based premise where the residents of an apartment block are being targeted by the sniper. Larger box with lots of different rooms, but still pretty hooky. I liked that one. Caves are tricky because caves are kind of interior, kind of exterior, right? And they can have parts that are open to the air and some parts that aren't. There are low-budget cave and movies, and this sort of starts to fall into the realm of what I call tunnel movies, which are either based entirely in caves, bunkers, and underground structures like that. They can work, but it's very easy to lose sense of progress if we're just wandering around lost in dark tunnels, so careful with that. Let's look at conceits. So you gotta kind of stick to one conceit. We're not writing anime in writing high-concept horror thriller and action movies. And that's the thing, is that fans of different types of media from around the world will sometimes be like, no, it's a simple, clear, beautiful premise. And we're like, no, there's 9 conceits in there. In terms of conceits, these are things the audience has to sort of buy into, things that we have to accept for the story to make sense, and that are, integral parts of what make that story work and click and make the marketing and the whole package of it really seem clear to us, right? Here's one that I thought was really good at first, but then I realized too late that it has multiple conceits in it. I quite like the fun of this one. Look at this. Sharp edges, action, Bloodsport meets Squid Game. This is not a logline, by the way. This is just a pitch which kind of explains what would be fun about it. A logline would include more specifics about the character and things like that, right? A ruthlessly determined American athlete on an overseas trip is kidnapped by human traffickers and forced into an underground blade combat tournament with deadly stakes. Her captors intend her to be part of the first-round fodder like the helpless prisoners fed to lions in the Colosseum. What they soon discover is that she's an Olympic fencer, and they are now the ones in the lion's den. That sort of had that fun reversal to me. We messed with the wrong person kind of quality to it until I pitched it to a producer like a week ago and realized then that it's actually 2 conceits. One, there's an underground blade combat tournament, which is already kind of like a buy-in, or like a thing that we have to kind of accept. And second would be that they happen to pick the worst possible person to force to be in their tournament. So I still really like this idea of modern fencer kills a lot of dudes with swords type of movie, but this just doesn't sing as a simple high concept because there's 2 things that we have to accept right off the bat instead of just 1. So be careful with too many kind of conceits or too much marzipan, as it's sometimes, or what is it, Blake Snyder calls this idea of too much marzipan, where you sort of add on layer after layer of cleverness or extra sort of like pieces to it until it's just like all icing and you can't taste the center anymore. Clear character arc. So a pitch doesn't have to always, like just a quick pitch, the elevator pitch doesn't always have to have a crystal clear version of the character arc, right? A logline, though, should really make it seem like there is some kind of interesting, relatable internal need that your character has that is sort of answered by that situation in whatever way. Maybe some fear they're trying to overcome, some deeper desire or thing they've been denied or that they're struggling with, or a unique weakness, flaw, limitation, or tactic that they use. Here's how we can start with just the situation. So how about this one? I thought this was a good idea until I saw the next Cary Fukunaga movie is basically a really similar premise to this, so I was like, okay, there's no point writing this now. But the idea of there's a blackout in the apartment building, and bad people take advantage of that to, torment the residents, the strangers style. The strangers in an apartment, where they're doing like a contained horror like that. I thought that was pretty good. And let's ask who could be the hero of that one, right? So how about somebody with a crippling fear of darkness? It just like seems to jump out. A character with, was it nyctophobia? Is that what it's called? And then thus the suggested arc, or first of all, their need or flaw seems to be answered or addressed by the situation, or uniquely challenged or tested by that situation. And then beyond that, there's the kind of implied progression of that character in that they will survive the situation, thereby overcoming the fear. That doesn't necessarily have to be how it plays out, but that would at least make it feel like this is the right character for this situation. Like you haven't just randomly picked, you've chosen carefully, and you've matched that person to their scenario. How about like Ghost steals your kid? I put 2 of these real ones at the bottom here. Look, Jessica Chastain with cool tattoos makes a great sort of lead if you have this kind of mother struggling with either postpartum depression, or she's unsure if she's fit to be a mother, or she's unsure she wants to have a kid, or she's not sure the kid is safe around her, or something like that can work quite well. And then having the ghost take your kid makes a perfect way to test that, and a really easy, clear, built-in arc. By saving the kid and getting them back, you're proving that you are a good parent after all. Right? Easy. There's all kinds of arcs that you could sort of suggest. You don't always have to have this right away. Like, you can start with just this cool situation and then kind of reverse engineer to figure out who would be the best character to star in that. Let's quickly go over the difference between horror and thriller. There's a lot of crossover here, and a lot of fans do disagree on the specific minutiae. Horror, though, is pretty much more about the scare, whereas thriller is more about suspense, chase, and mystery. In horror, the hook is the threat, whereas in thriller, the hook is the situation. There's a game element to thrillers where the audience might actually be invited to kind of figure out what's going on or to resolve the situation before or as the characters do, so that sense of driving mystery can be really prominent in thrillers. Not that horror can't have it. People don't tend to respect horror as much, so horror that does really well tends to be relabeled or reconsidered as a thriller. That's the big difference. Thrillers revolve less around supernatural stuff usually, but there's also supernatural or sci-fi thrillers, so that's not even a hard rule. These are kind of flexible definitions. In thriller, it's like there's a guy in your house and he has a gun. In horror, it's like there's a guy in your house and he's crawling on the wall. Horror villains really thrive on this element of mystery and inscrutability and not really explaining everything, whereas thriller villains often thrive better on cleverness, rational, if unhinged, philosophical points of view, and a hint of sympathy or understanding where they're sort of coming from. Even if they are ultimately, totally crazy psychotic, we kind of need to know, like, a little bit of why. If they tip too far into inscrutability, like we never learn why they're doing what they're doing, they're sort of just Michael Myers, whatever it is, then that's angling more towards that horror part. Our main plot types are going to be, we have sci-fi, supernatural, crime, survival. Intrigue or institutional doesn't really fit into the contained paradigm, but that is a plot type. And then mystery as well, which you could easily have a contained mystery. The whole, like, Agatha Christie subgenre is nothing but contained mystery thrillers. I'm not going to go with the Dan Brown stuff. Basically, in all of these genres we're talking about, stakes should be life and death, or if not, you have some really great reason why it isn't that. We can also fear all kinds of other things, mutilation, loss of loved one, insanity, but given how much the movie has to escalate, most of the time we're going to have to be pushing to life and death by the end. If the consequences are mostly social or played matter-of-factly and realistically and aren't really being orchestrated for maximum entertaining scariness, then chances are it might be a crime movie or a dark drama like Detroit or In Cold Blood. It almost never works to mitigate the stakes and show that they weren't as high as we thought later down the line, so be careful about undercutting the stakes, meaning that we learn that it wasn't as serious as we thought it was. Something like The Others proves that if you do this, the truth that we learn has to be more sort of horrifying than the initial stakes even suggested. In terms of horror, we have our three main plot types are drama, survival, or mystery, meaning mystery, central question that needs to be resolved, though usually that question is, what is the monster and how can I defeat it? Survival, we know what the monster is, and it may be kind of mysterious or inscrutable like Friday the 13th, and the main question is, how do we survive it? And drama is going to be characters that are attempting to resolve interpersonal issues because they are intrinsically linked with the horrific thing going on, or it could simply be that your characters are struggling with interpersonal issues in addition to the horrific thing that's going on, but usually they are tied together in a clear and key way. So the thread is the hook in horror. The bad guy, the bad thing, the dark force, the creature, they can come from emotional... You might think of just really simply, they come from me, you, or everything else. Emotional pain, meaning that they are going to be sort of manifestations or otherwise sort of metaphorical explorations of various types of human pain. That might be your grief ghost kind of thing that the Babadook really kind of popularized, and now people seem to think is really passé for some reason, even though it works very well, and also, like, that movie did it great. We have human evil, which is going to be the you. That's going to be people doing evil stuff for reasons that may or may not ever become evident. And last, we have a cold and uncaring universe, which is going to be your animals, your cosmic horror, your Cthulhu, or your giant octopus, or your sharks and snakes and things like that. So let's look at some tips for writing a horror thriller and action premises that will sell in 2024. So my tips for horror for you are the best premises in this space are the ones that people say are kind of, quote, right there. What does it mean for something to be right there? It means that it's already in the public consciousness. It's already something that is well known and obviously scary. You could just call a movie that and people basically know what it would pretty much be. Every creepypasta, children's game, urban legend, or folkloric character is completely up for grabs. You have to really watch a lot of the genre, though, to know what's been done lately and what has been done. Maybe, like, the nice thing is if something has been done, but in a really poor, low-budget, terrible way, or in a different country 10 years ago or something like that, there's sometimes a chance for you to just do it again. If it's right there, then it's in the public kind of consciousness already. What do we have here? Bloody Mary, Ghost in the Graveyard, Tarot, and La Llorona. I will say from development meetings I've been in the past couple of years, a lot of folks are like, God, I wish we'd gotten to Tarot first. Or, oh, La Llorona was right there. Why did nobody ever do it up until now? It's just sitting there. It's just waiting to have a movie made of it. That's kind of what we're looking for, that juicy, high-concept idea that people already know what it is and has a clear set of rules built into it already. Ouija board, that kind of stuff. Anything with a Ouija board type, like, game rule element to it has been thoroughly explored, but like they'll never go away entirely. You'll always find new versions of this. What is it? The elevator game was one of them for the past couple of years. We've got like anything that the teens can do at home works really well because you can it just markets itself, right? You'll get the teenagers doing the Snapchats of themselves trying the challenge from the movie or whatever it is. What was that one that they did for? Was it Charlie? Was that one of those like urban legend, scary Bloody Mary type things? I thought the movie didn't really take full advantage of it, but it was the Gallows, I think is what it was called. Nacho says BRB writing Magic 8 Ball Horror Spec. It's already in development, Nacho. Don't bother. I don't think that's a secret. I think that's public. I hope I did not just drop that. Yeah, Magic 8 Ball. Anything with a branding, anything with Hasbro or with like a corporate sticker on it in some way is pretty much done. Luke says calling It the Clown at 3 a.m. OMG, he answered. Yeah, that sort of thing could easily be a high concept modern sort of horror premise. You better believe that when the creepy clown sightings were a thing again, like 5 to 10 years ago, then there were a bunch of creepy clown movies suddenly being pitched. Although I think those might have been viral marketing for It Chapter 1. I'm not 100% sure. Any questions about this idea of stuff being right there? Okay, no questions. Let's keep going on to tips for thriller. So with thriller, you want to practice starting with a location, because a lot of the time the way these movies actually will come together is the producers will have a location locked down, and they will even movies like Midsommar worked this way. Like a producer came to Ari Aster and was like, "Hey, I've got this field in these like this really big field," and I think maybe he had a few of the buildings, like the temples and the things like that, and was like, "Hey, do you want to do a horror movie there? Like, make it work." You start with the location. It's like a puzzle then to almost try out and audition different moving pieces and remove something, add something back in, just to get just the right minimalist, really hooky, clear version of what the story would be. So brainstorm all the possible games within the walls of your space. Green Room, Fall, Frozen. It's not the singing Frozen, but the other Frozen. This is the just examples of very, very, very small boxes for these stories to take place in, but that are really kind of helped by the cramped, claustrophobic nature of those locations. I guess Fall's not really claustrophobic, it's more the opposite, isn't it? But still, we can't leave that little tiny platform, right? More thriller tips. Zeitgeist. What is the zeitgeist? The defining spirit or mood of a particular period of history, as shown by the ideas and beliefs of that time. In German, it would be more like Zeitgeist, but we'll say Zeitgeist because we're Americans. Thriller is a very trendy, hip genre of right now. It was a big question, for instance, who would be the first one to do the dating app thriller or the escape room thriller? How many escape room movies have been made? I think I've seen 4 of them. You better believe that as soon as escape rooms come out, all of the thriller producers are like, oh, we have to get on that right away. So this is very much a genre about what is going on now and what people are talking about and thinking about. Let's ask this question. What's in the zeitgeist right now? What are people talking about? I'm going to give you a couple. Shout them out. AI, election and political instability, climate change and environmental issues. Dating apps we mentioned, people love those for movies. LGBT topics are gaining a lot of prominence on the sort of mass media stage. What else? What are people talking about? Just list them off in the chat. What's in the zeitgeist right now? While you guys are typing, I'll let you know that we are on Discord, so if you're watching on one of our different streams, like on YouTube, Twitch, Twitter, or something like that, you can come join us on our Discord server. You can find the link to that by going to scriptcamp.net and click the, oops, not science, scriptcamp.net. There we go. So click this Discord button in the top right corner, and you can come join us for these interactive classes, workshops, and events. Okay, I'm going to read from the chat now. What's in the zeitgeist? The end of the world. Isn't it always kinda, like, recently more so? Yeah, end of the world. Stanley Cups. I don't know what that is, but that is probably a sports thing that people know about. Red Pill / Manosphere, definitely. Olympics. Yep, I think that one's coming up this year, right? Is there a 2024 Olympics? So sure, every 4 years, maybe that's one of those sort of cyclical ones, right? Strong political things I'd rather not get into. Okay, yep, for sure. Drones. Drones are huge, absolutely. Boeing. So yeah, the whistleblower kind of scandals and issues around that. What else? Rom-coms are back. Yeah, rom-coms are definitely coming back. I wouldn't say that in terms of just like the public consciousness, I wouldn't say that's necessarily an element of the zeitgeist, but it is true. And I have been told that in several meetings lately that now is the time for rom-coms. Rom-coms don't really need to be contained in the same way as what we're talking about today, though. AI was mentioned. Billionaires. Yeah, billionaires and wealth inequality or redistribution, things like this. The police. Yep, police reform. Huge in the news. Great. Trade union, says Nacho. That might be outside of my personal zeitgeist sphere, but maybe trade unions are on everyone's mind at the moment. War, definitely. War in Russia, Ukraine. Huge news at the moment. That might be touching on the sort of too soon category. We don't typically want to be doing high concept movies about current conflicts or tragedies, but very soon afterwards, believe me, they will jump on it. How many Ukraine war stories do you think are being plotted right now? The answer is probably about 5 trillion, but they're not going to make them for a bit. We have to kind of wait to see how things shake out before I think that Ukraine war movies will start happening. But there will be a lot. It'll be like a whole genre in a couple years. Insider trading, says Andrew. Is that particularly in the news at the moment? I know the creator of Sonic was recently got in some hot water for insider trading, but that tells you where my media literacy is at. Economy, inflation, and immigration, huge issues. Immigration, massive issue right now. Economy, yes, exactly, Dakota. Huge, huge, huge. If you could write a contained horror thriller reaction movie that touches on the immigrant experience somehow, you will be in a good spot. But it has to be just right. Like, that's the thing, is that when it comes to sensitive topics, there's a right way and there's like a way that really clicks and really works, and there's a wrong way to play it too. So you do have to be a little bit careful and be sensitive, and always be, keeping in mind who could be hurt by this, who would feel belittled by this, or any questions like that. So obviously there's a way to pull anything off. Let's see, what else we got? Global warming, weather, yep, heat waves, hurricanes, floods, definitely. These things can all play, but these things are already coming up in movies in a big way. Anybody see Don't Look Up? It's like what the whole movie's about. Organized crime, tells Andrew says. Maybe that's the case. I may have missed if organized crime is back on the rise. Supreme Court rulings, yeah, and simply the idea of, ow, I whacked my hand on my desk. The idea of rules or laws being made that the people disagree with. Basically, that links back to our idea of political instability. Vicky tells us uprisings, yeah, revolutions. Those were more in the news in the past decade, I would say, because of Arab Spring and a lot of sort of revolutions that cropped up around the same time. But it's not too far out of the zeitgeist at the moment. Influencers, Nacho tells us, yeah. How many horror thrillers have been already made based on influencers? I would say that one is starting to oversaturate. So you can still do an influencer movie, but I think I've seen 3 different movies with the title just Influencer or The Influencer. So careful there. There is some stuff that's been overdone. So we want to be original, but you don't want to be too original, and you don't want to hit something that's been hit too many times. It's hard to find that exact balance, right? Okay, so yeah, great suggestions on things that are in the zeitgeist, and you can definitely find ways to weave those intrinsically into the fabric of your thriller premise. We'll come back to this, and we'll do much more practice coming up. I want to just kind of wrap up, and I'm going quicker than I usually go through the presentation, simply because we have. I want to leave time for us to come up with ideas. Okay, so action tips. First of all, it's hard to come up with a limited contained action premise that actually makes sense. So again, I will stress that's things like martial arts tournaments are your friends when it comes to those contained environments. But here's something else to keep in mind. Action hero people want to star in these movies because they want to look and act like a total badass. Some have different interpretations of exactly what that means, and they allow for different levels of sort of vulnerability for their character. Some want to act harder than others, but there's no reason not to shoot for the stars, really, in terms of character depth and drama, or comedy, if that's your thing. But I would just remember, action heroes can be flawed, but generally not in the sense that their competence is in question. And, like, you need an action hero type star to get one of these movies made. So you have to think, who would be the kind of people that would want to be in this, and is this a character they would simply be interested in? It's a little bit superficial to think of it in these terms, but it actually matters a lot. It's how that person wants to simply appear and be on screen, right? Like, if you have a feeble, humiliated main character, Jason Statham's not going to play him in a movie. Like, you have to think these are actors that sometimes have contracts that say they can't lose fights on screen. So you gotta factor that competence into the storytelling and find some other flaw besides competence. I would suggest any number of other things. Consider their pride, their anger, grief, and they can be haunted, troubled, or penitent. They can be too devoted to their work. They can occasionally die at the end, if it's earned and maybe tragic, but pretty much has to be dramatic and badass and not cowardly, humiliating, random, or senseless at all. Like, an action star is not going to star in All Quiet on the Western Front. They usually win, and they usually don't die, though. And also, like, we'd like to have the possibility of sequels as well. Look at what do we have here? Equalizer 2. If you write the character that dies, especially in a lame way, Denzel is not going to play him in a movie. Just a fact. You got to look at these characters as kind of aspirational in a sense, in that we kind of like, we want to look at them and be like, hell yeah, even if normally you wouldn't want to hang out with that character or whatever, but it's like sort of a power fantasy to be them. for the purposes of the movie. So hyper competent, flawed in some other way. That's my tip for you for action writing. Okay, more tips for all of these. 1, is there attainable underlying material? That could be almost anything, even something like an online article or a journal or a journal article or like a magazine article or something like that can be perfectly fine in terms of underlying material. If there's an existing urban legend that surrounds something, that may or may not count as underlying material, depending on how kind of codified, I would say, that story is. Like, has it actually been is there like one definitive version of that story out there? There isn't for some of them. Some of them have kind of flexible backstories. Like, we know the basic backstory of La Llorona, and that she's a woman who lost her child, or sometimes was jilted at the altar and drowned herself, or something like that. But you can see there's already different versions of it. So you can pick and choose and carve away everything that doesn't work in order to try to find the best thing. But it's really helpful in terms, at least in producers' eyes, to have that underlying material that they can draw from and they can be like, they can refer back to. And when they pitch it to other people, because you pitching it to them is only the first step in them selling it to someone else. So it's really helpful if they have something they can refer back to. What else? Is your movie connected to something? We kind of covered this. Something in the news, pop culture, or topics in the greater zeitgeist? Does your story feature underrepresented groups or individuals in a prominent, worthwhile, and illuminating way? But don't force it. Like, you can always just write an awesome character and then somebody of any background can play that character. I would say if you can speak with any authority in terms of lived experience as to what that character would be going through, or if you're writing a story about sort of that touches on what it fundamentally means to be something, then first of all, just don't write it if it is outside of your, like, in terms of selling your story, like, you will be in trouble if you write a movie about fundamentally what does it mean to be Jewish in the year 2024 and you're not Jewish, or if you're trying to write a movie, what does it fundamentally mean to be, anything, a Muslim, a Palestinian, pick. If it comes down to racial, ethnic, religious groups like that, I would typically say, don't base the entire movie around what it fundamentally means to be that identity, unless you are that identity. But that said, if you can elevate some underrepresented group or individual in your story in some way, then go for it. Like, if you can, then go for it, but don't force it, because it comes across really clearly if it's forced. What else? Does your story take place in a state or country with strong tax incentives? Ideally, it would portray the state or country in a decent way, but Breaking Bad sure as hell didn't, so I don't know. Like, that doesn't always matter that much. I would think that if you wanted to get, like, Irish Film Board funds or something like that, then it would have to not only take place in Ireland, but make Ireland not seem like a total dump. You have to kind of consider who you're asking for money from in certain cases. But for instance, I saw a horror movie about goblins that was set in Ireland. I forget the title. If somebody can look that up, that would be great. But it was about, little green goblins. And they got funding from the government to make that goblin movie because they're tied to that nation's folklore and, elevating an element of that country's mythology. So you can get money from the government from certain countries if all the factors are right. Okay, so there's my last little tips for you. I want to maybe open to questions and discussion just because I've talked nonstop for 50 minutes now on anything we've discussed. And then we're going to go into practice. We're going to brainstorm boxes, and we're going to look at different hooks, and we're going to basically be thinking of movie ideas, concepts for the rest of the class. Before we get there, let me just open the floor to any and all questions. Becky has one. Go ahead. And Dakota says the Goblin film's called Unwelcome. Thank you. Was that it? Unwelcome. It had a great ending. You can either type or you can raise a hand, Becky. I can just invite you to stage if you want to ask your question out loud.
Yeah, it's easier for me. So I'm interested in writing a movie aimed at, I wouldn't really say kids, more tweens, that kind of, like, it would be a Disney Channel show, a Disney Channel film, or, those kind of low budget one-offs, TV movies that kids watch. Do you have any tips specifically, like how to keep it contained and make it cheap for that kind of audience, or should I just not? Should I just like?
I guess I would say that for the most part, horror, thriller, and action movies are not made for a younger audience. Can you give some examples of what you're talking about?
Well, uh, I know that horror can be, as an example, I mean, it was more of a short TV series, but Goosebumps. Obviously, that was much bigger, set-wise. But I'm thinking kind of more like whether something that doesn't fit into those genres, but something like High School Musical, an equivalent of, could be done low budget, that kind of feel good coming together type story.
Okay. Well, it's definitely outside of my personal experience because I don't write those things, so I won't be able to give you too many tips on like family-friendly contained stories. But I will say most of the time, yeah, like family type entertainment is usually not contained in the same way that adult horror, thriller, and action are. If you're writing something like what did you mention, High School Musical, that is the sort of thing that would go to streaming nowadays. Like we don't really do made for TV movie, at least in the U.S. Maybe in different countries, there's a different situation. But
I'd be streaming now, but yeah.
Streaming, yeah, exactly.
I mean straight to stream, not to cinema. Is what I mean.
Right.
When I say TV movies.
Gotcha. Okay, so yeah, that's a lot of what we're talking about. These sort of low budget horror, thriller, and action movies would go straight to streaming nowadays and not get big theatrical releases. They still can if you do well enough. But I guess what I'm saying is that we're sort of already talking about the top because like distribution is sort of it's a little bit out of our hands. As writers, it's like not really our department to ultimately land the movie somewhere. We're just trying to do the best version of it that we can. But in terms of tips for writing stuff to go straight to streamers, I would say that's what this class is pretty much, I guess, largely revolving around, considering that you're going to want to lower the budget. You want to lower the locations.
Yeah.
You're going to want to limit the number of actors. You're going to want to limit the number of effects.
Right.
It's mostly just going to come down to keeping the budget as low as possible. And then that would probably just be a movie that went to streaming. Go ahead.
If I go the other way then, and I say, no, okay, I'm not going to bother doing this for kids, this is kind of going off track, but it's a very quick question.
Okay.
Would you say that in my case, I should maybe have a pseudonym or a variation of my name as a screenwriter versus as being a children's author?
That's a good question. I don't know. Normally, I would say it doesn't matter that much. I think that in terms of your audience, there's not really crossover between horror fans and young readers of like adults who watch horror, thriller, and action, and middle graders who read books are going to be different groups that you don't have to really worry about any kind of problems resulting from. So I guess I'm just talking around the idea that I don't know. I probably wouldn't worry about it, is my I'm going to tell you.
Okay. My concern was if I got a following. Like what happened when J.K. Rowling wrote an adult book but kept her name. I think that was a book and a book, but...
Yeah, I think it would be a bigger issue if it were books. So if you were writing adult horror novels and also writing children's novels, then there's a chance that your reader might pick up the wrong one by accident or something like that. Whereas with movies, it's not... I mean, people don't even really look at who wrote the movie, for the most part.
Cool, thank you.
Sure. Thanks for the questions. Let's see, I'll check the chat as well, see if there were any typed questions. I see a question. Are there general questions about scripts or specific about this class? About this class. So everything we talked about in the presentation. Okay, question from Nacho. Tips for making single location feel interesting. Over the course of the movie, we're discovering several facets or aspects of the space. Great question. This is definitely something we can dig very deep into. So I would look at pulling up the floorboards, tearing down the walls, the ceilings. Like we can use every part of a space for a contained thriller. Even a movie like ATM, which you're like, how many games can we play in a box with an ATM? More than you'd think is the answer. Think of what happens when you tear stuff apart in the room. Remember, always the phone will be a game changer when it comes to contained thriller as well. And if your characters have access to the outside world, then that can open up a lot of possibilities or by removing that, sometimes you can figure out more games to be played too. So think of the technology that exists in that space. Think of if we are in a room with the ATM there's basically a computer there. Can you break it open? Can we start connecting the wires together in interesting ways to make it do other stuff? Can we start a fire with the sparks? Can we break the glass and use the shards of glass? I would think smaller. Think of little details. Write down every single thing in the space, and then write down 5 things you could do with it, and then think of a 6th thing. And sort of by exhausting those early possibilities, it will it's like that writing exercise where we describe a room, and then just describe every single detail in the room, and then more, and then more, and then more, and it sort of forces you to dig down really, really, really deep, and to find stuff that you would not have thought of right away. So play with it that way. That's what I would recommend. What if there's a folktale monster based specifically in a state or region of the US, but isn't particularly known anywhere else by the name? Good question, Dakota. For instance, the Pope Lick monster equals the Goat Man, but has a specific reason for the name, and a story already that is nationally known, especially if you're a history buff, but isn't exactly part of the zeitgeist too much, even though the general concept of the monster is. So if the name of your creature or monster or threat or hook is not well known, you have to pick a version of it that is. I would say at the very least, we should be able to tell what it is basically by seeing it. So even if we're unfamiliar with it, then the audio, the Goat Man, I get. The Pope Lick monster, do not call your movie that under any circumstance, because you have to imagine the first thing that the audience would picture when they hear that title. And if that's basically right, then you're along the right line. So if you are dealing with some sort of regional monster that has some name that's hard to pronounce or hard to remember or just isn't that well known, you sometimes see movies picking an adjective that pertains to that monster. Remember, what do we have? Sinister and stuff like that, right? It's not called Bagul. Or if it's a Sasquatch movie, there's a bunch of Sasquatch movies that aren't called Sasquatch. They're called things like Ferocious or, I don't know, Scary Teeth, stuff like that, right? So find maybe an adjective that describes the character, or think of maybe the situation that the characters are in, and maybe that can be more of the hook. So, for instance, we're trapped in a hunting cabin with a Sasquatch stalking us. What are those called? Is it called a hunting cabin? The thing that's up in the hunting platform. Trapped in a hunting platform stalked by Sasquatch is a great idea for a contain. Somebody write that. A horror. And you wouldn't need to call it Sasquatch. You might call it, I don't know, The Platform. We did The Platform, though, didn't we? That was like a Spanish thriller with the platform full of food. I hope that makes sense. So pick an adjective that maybe describes the feeling that character gives you, or the curse that it applies to people, or its scary traits in some other way. You're going to have to call it something that is not necessarily the monster's real, true name. Okay, Luke, go ahead.
Dan asked a question too, but my question was in chat. What about concepts that have been done to death but are right there? So, Bigfoot movies, shark movies, things that have been done a million times but still keep getting made.
Yeah, that's a good question. So it depends on the producer. Some producers, I will say the majority of them will say things like, we don't want to do stuff that's been done to death, unless you have a great new spin or twist on it. The producers I was just working with recently were like, spiders and sharks are basically out. Unless, ... you have some new way into those things, or some situation in which your character would be particularly vulnerable to those things, or you have some great character that would have some interesting job related to those things that could be tormented in some specific way, or something like that, right? You have to find something new. You can definitely do a spider or a shark movie, and they get made every year, but a lot of them are really cookie cutter and samey and terrible. You don't want yours to be one of those. Your goal should not be to write a cookie cutter movie, even if the subject matter is done to death. The fact that it is done to death is sort of a sign that you should back away from that and pick something else, for the most part. But if you have a brilliant... I wouldn't just sit there racking your brain on how can I do a shark movie, unless you're I have to do a shark movie because this. I don't know what this would be. So it's an area of caution. I'd recommend staying away from stuff that's been done to death for the most part.
Okay.
Hope that answered that question. The answer was kind of, kind of.
I mean, it's about what I expected.
Yeah.
Dan's question was above mine, and it's what if the message and moral can't wait years for people to hear, as in people need to become aware through subtext or whatever now?
I'm not quite sure what that means. People need...
I'm not sure either. Can you
need to be aware?
Ask your question, Dan?
Yeah, feel free to raise your hand if you want to clarify. I will say the moral or the message of the movie is not part of the pitch, though. I've invited you to the stage, so feel free to speak up if you want, or you can clarify in the text. Either way.
I guess what I'm saying is, since you said we can't talk about certain issues, I guess I'm saying if this issue needs to be talked about now, like if it's like, this country is going to die in a war if we don't raise awareness about it soon, but then we don't raise awareness about it soon enough with our story. And now the country's all dead, everybody's dead, it doesn't matter anymore.
Well, I will say...
Am I making sense? Because you did mention stuff like you can't talk about war or the prosecutions going on in Palestine or wherever countries you care about or anyone cares about.
Right. So it takes a long time for a movie to get made, though, is the thing. You have to factor that in, like the idea that making, reshooting, editing a movie, that's long enough. But like the sometimes it can take sometimes a year to even get the movie going off the ground, right? So it might be 2 years from when you first come up with the idea to when you execute the thing on screen and you see it on screen. It could be more. So there is the sense in terms of these genres, like especially thriller, that these are movies about things going on right now. But you might miss your window if it's something that is literally currently ongoing in a very fragile kind of, like if it could be over tomorrow, then I wouldn't make a movie about it probably. I would say that in terms of, like, you can definitely write movies that involve wars and things like that. But when it comes to sensitivities about the subject matter, such as like recent massacres or things like you don't want to write a movie about a school shooting that took place last week. So it's just simply too fresh in people's minds, and they would simply not, producers would not be interested in buying those concepts. So I think it's more about that than it is about the, like, did I derail my train of thought there? Did I basically answer your question, or do you want to clarify?
I think so.
Okay. Cool. Thanks for that. I hope that is helpful. And
it does. Disheartening, but helpful.
Yes. Takes a long time to get a movie made. You can never really rely on a movie happening quickly is the thing. Even getting notes back on a draft takes forever. Looks like we have a question from Kvasilia.
Hello, bro. I wrote to you from YouTube video. I miss script for cheats in Roblox on survival. You can help me find him.
Okay, I think he's doing a troll. We have a bit of trolling happening. Nope. Any other questions? Krampus is still exploitable. I don't think that dead horse has been fully beaten. There was a pretty big, like, PG-13 wide-release US Krampus movie, though, so I would actually stay away from Krampus, personally. There's other sort of Christmas evil stuff, though, that you could draw from. What about the German guy Ruprecht? He's this kind of, like, I think he's just a dude. He's like an evil Santa, but he just, like, goes around whacking children with a stick if they were naughty. Anyone else? Charlie says Black Peter could be fun. Could it? Are you sure? I don't know if you want to go down that route. Romy, are heist movies back in style? Well, that's an interesting question. So heist movies are definitely possible to do within these contained environments. It can be tricky. If you can find a way to do an interesting contained heist, I'd say yeah, definitely, for sure. Or con movies like Saltburn. Yeah, definitely. I think those work quite well. What was one I really liked recently? It's not contained. It was a dark comedy dramedy. Kajillionaire by Miranda July. Loved it. Question from Dave Diamond. Is there a season where features are bought more, or is it pretty even all year round? Well, it's not even right now, considering the industry is in probably the worst spot it's been in decades. So stuff is not getting bought or made right now in the U.S. That much. Even A-level talent is not getting stuff made at the moment. But when the Yahtzee strike situation resolves, it will probably even out a little bit. As far as I know, there are not like times of year where movies are more likely to be bought or made. I don't think so. But then again, I would ask somebody deeper in production than me. Okay. Any other questions before we move on to premise, brainstorming, practice, and various types of fun like that? Or do you just want to troll us about your Roblox account? Luke. Well, actually, Luke's going to troll us about Roblox now. Go ahead.
No, just a question about time period.
Okay.
So if you do a contained movie, but, you know, it's set in 1860 or 1920 or some very specific time period, does that sort of reduce your chances of getting it made significantly?
Yes. Unfortunately, it does reduce. It doesn't seem that logical considering you're like, well, how much could it cost? It's just some people in the woods in funny costumes. But producers just get scared off by it a little bit. It can still work and it can still happen. Think of something like The Witch or something like, what's it called? What was the one I'm thinking of? I just had it. There are definitely period piece contained horror thriller genre type movies. Not really action though. And it's definitely possible to shoot them in a cheap way, but it will be like a knock against you from the start. So it's not impossible to surmount that problem, but it is a setback at the start, and you want to just kind of avoid setbacks. So, for the most part, especially in thriller, don't do period pieces. They're about right now. They're about things that are happening now and things that catch people's attention now. Almost always the producer's first note will be, can this be modern day?
Okay, that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Thanks for the question. I see a hand raised from Becky.
Before I ask my question, I'm just going to say, I bet you wish you lived in England, Luke. We have loads of old houses that are hired out for period dramas because they all love them.
Yeah, it's more of a thing overseas than here. Consider that the U.S. only has about 300 years of history, and there's just less interest in historical stuff here. It gets made less. It is considered less marketable and popular.
As an aside, and again, I have got a question, but for example, in the UK, there was a guy that's literally built a recreation of the trenches from World War One he's got a massive back garden and he owns a massive house and he's kept it all from that period. So the BBC, who make low budget stuff, often goes there to film documentaries, films, TV shows, because it's all in one location and they can just do it. It's like it's pretty cool.
That is cool.
But period is a big thing here. So yeah, when I was talking about with like a kids movie, I was thinking, I managed to kind of define it a bit more. I was thinking some kind of contained in the sense of it's something about a group of underdogs that are wanting to compete. So, you get the things like the Mighty Ducks. That's what I was thinking High School Musical, but it's things where they go to some sort of competition thing and they're the underdogs and, and you've got all the tribulations, you've got the people leaving, the people coming back, that kind of, kid power. That's what I was thinking, and I was wondering whether, because most of it, if it was, for example, a group of school friends, you could film most of it in a school, because you wouldn't need to, you might occasionally need to go to a kid's home if, you had a scene there, but most of it could take place while they're rehearsing in school and on the school grounds, and
that's
I suppose that's the sort of thing I think.
Yeah, it's a good question. Does like a school count as a contained environment? I guess is sort of what you're asking.
Yeah, and it wouldn't be a set because schools exist. But I suppose what I'm asking is, it's not really matching the genres you've said, but it's still self-contained. So,
Breakfast Club would be like an example of this, right? Like Breakfast Club is a very contained drama that takes place all pretty much in one room in the school. So I would say for like the entire school plus its grounds is not considered a contained environment for the most part. That's like a really big box, but at least it is a box. I mean, it's easier to make than a sports movie that takes place half on the football field and half in the school or something like that. So if you are going to do a school movie within the contained sort of worlds, I would pick like a specific area of the school to contain it, to like draw that smaller box. For instance, like I could maybe see a story working about a debate club or something like that, right? Or a bunch of students taking a test, or maybe they go into the school after hours to do a ritual. Or I think we've seen a few movies like that. So yeah, it can.
I did kind of have the idea that when I was younger that maybe they got to go into school because their head teacher's a vampire or something. Like I had that kind of idea.
That could be fun.
Like horror for kids, the real out of this world horror, but horror for kids. That's where I was originally said, like, Goosebumps.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so that's an option as well.
Yeah, that'd be fun. It'd be fun to do a movie where all the sort of assumptions, or like the weird ideas you have as a kid about what the teachers do when you're not there, were just like true. Like, what do you sleep under your desk? Like, I think when you're always weirded out seeing your teacher at the grocery store as a kid, you're like, I thought you slept at school. You know, it'd be kind of fun to explore that idea. That could be interesting. I'm not sure what question I was answering, but that is. Oh, I think we.
Go ahead.
Yeah.
It's whether there's kind of scope to not go down the traditional horror, thriller, low budget route and to attempt it with a different genre.
Oh, okay. You probably could, but I don't think these contained elements would be as appealing to producers in those different genres. I don't really pitch to drama or comedy people, so I'm not the exact right one to weigh in on that necessarily. But like, we're talking about these contained boxes because they actually amplify the tension, the pressure, the claustrophobia, all these things, whereas dramas and comedies are not usually helped by that.
Maybe I do kids horror. Kids horror.
Yeah, there's just not a lot of contained kids horror movies, I guess is what I'm thinking of, right? Like, it might even seem too scary or something. I'm not sure why. Maybe that's worth looking into.
When I say kids, I do mean like tweens.
Ah, okay. Yeah. So, for instance, Scary Story Used to Tell in the Dark was like a tween-ish kind of like PG-13 premise, but not contained in the slightest. I mean, they go all over the town.
No. This would be contained, but
right.
Yeah, cool.
I think it's uncharted territory to some extent, Becky. So, like, the idea of contained horror thriller for kids is maybe something you'd have to pioneer.
Oh, yeah, I'll do that.
Well, I think that sounds fun. Yeah, go ahead. Get creative. Thanks for the questions. I see a raised hand. Go ahead.
So there was two things. One of them's a question. The other one is, I'm currently writing a script that's sort of. The other one I keep asking about how to keep things PG. It's sort of a contained sort of thriller horror thing for children, but so it looks like I'm going to have to fight Becky to be the first one to come out with something like that. Anyway, what I was thinking about is how advisable is it to tap into like the zeitgeist of like foreign countries? Would you find it be harder to make if you go, there's a big market for this in India or China or somewhere like that? Do you think that would be a selling point or not so much of a selling point?
That's a great question. It can definitely be a selling point, but if you aren't like linked to that country or culture in some way, then it can work against you a little bit. We do see all kinds of like the idea of especially taking foreign cultural concepts, scary folk tales, monsters and stuff, and kind of re-exploring them for a global audience is a very American Hollywood type of thing. We do that all the time. There's lots of examples of that. The Grudge, I guess, was like, or The Ring and The Grudge was like that really like big push towards foreign horror in the early 2000s. So we saw a lot of that kind of stuff. And even now, especially in terms of like Blumhouse style movies on streaming like Amazon, you will see movies like The Evil Eye, which is based very much in a really, really strong cultural perspective. So that can very much be a selling point within horror thriller. You just kind of have to like play your cards so you don't get replaced on your own movie, though, is the only thing. Because if the concept is good enough, they might be like, well, thanks, but we'd really rather get a version of this idea from somebody who can speak with authority to that culture. Do you see what I'm saying? So it can be a problem. You can definitely explore those things and look into them and think of different ways that your characters might be able to access those things, or you can find ways to use those things in stories. But it can be very tough, especially if you're like, the whole movie... I'm not from Cambodia, but I saw this really cool Cambodian ghost in a book, and now I wrote an entire movie set in Cambodia with Cambodian characters that fight against that ghost. They probably just wouldn't pull the movie off exactly like that. So you have to, I guess, look at the sort of stuff that does get made, look at the people behind it, and especially if you want to be getting funds from that country, which you usually would have to be in order to film there, and you have to get permission to make the movie there and everything like that, then you just want to stack the deck in your favor as much as possible.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. Let's see. If you want to go, Romy says, if you want to go super contained for a thriller, Locke is the film I think of. He's on the phone while driving for 90 minutes. Yeah, I mean, I guess it's technically not contained in the sense that he's driving all over the road, but like it is contained in the sense that all of the action of the movie is just in that one car. A pretty low, even tone for it too. He doesn't even get super emotional for most of the movie. So yeah, on a car on the highway it can be contained unless your character is doing stunts and stuff, right? Like the movie Unhinged also mostly does take place with characters in cars, but is not contained in that same way. Also, if you want to get a movie like Lockman, you pretty much have to be a really big name, because with the premise that low-key, you gotta have some serious weight behind it. Dakota mentions Phone Booth. Yep, Phone Booth, 2001 or 2. I think that's the first R-rated movie I even saw in a theater. 2002, thank you. Okay, so it looks like we're getting to the end of the questions. I want to move ahead into, unless I missed anything. Did I miss anyone? I'm going to check the stream people chat as well. Gomo on Kick says hi. Hi, Gomo. Would you like to join us on Discord? You can find the link by going to scriptcamp.net and clicking the Discord button in the top right. And that way you can join the class. Also, maybe you can tell me what Kick is. Okay. Let's move ahead, because it looks like I'm not seeing any more questions at the moment. Let's go into practice. And we're going to do some brainstorming and some thinking. And the idea is that you're trying to think of a couple different premises that you can refine and sharpen for next week's class. And you come back and pitch the expanded version of that story when you're ready. Excuse me. Okay. So let me open up a Google Doc. Oops. Horror, thriller, action, contained. Brainstorm. Okay, so, couple things. Before we go into this, I will suggest, first of all, don't be too precious about the ideas. If you have a truly amazing idea that you think is so good that you're like, okay, I have to write that before anyone else can think of that, then just don't share it in the class. This is sort of like a time for practice and to build these muscles. I wouldn't get too attached to these ideas. You don't have to write these movies. And especially when you're working in this kind of low-budget movie space, you have to get used to the idea of coming up with a ton of ideas that only one or two of them will really get someone's attention. They won't want to develop 10 ideas with you. They're going to pick one out of that, and then it may or may not go anywhere. So don't be too precious with this. Like, look at this as just a fun exercise. You're not trying to come up with the next $1 million idea. You're trying to sort of get used to the fundamentals of the moving pieces of a strong movie concept in these genre spaces. Hope that makes sense. Okay, so let's get started. Let's start with boxes. I'm going to say tiny, small, medium, large. Remember, we went over those basics. Let's recap really quickly. Different size of box. We have your tiny box. Your character can barely move. The small box, like one single room. Medium box, large room or few linked rooms. The large box might be a whole house. The huge box is going to be a whole complex, a whole mansion, a whole cruise ship, something like that. Okay, so let's start with one at a time. We'll start with tiny boxes. I want to see just a ton of suggestions for tiny box. Character can barely move. I see sensory deprivation tank. Perfect. There's definitely... I would look in... See if that's been done, actually. What else? Under the covers. Okay, that's so cute. I kind of love that. The whole movie takes place under the covers. Hiding under the bed. Okay. Cubicle could work. What else we got? WC. I think that's British speak for water closet, which means bathroom. So I'll just say bathroom, I guess. What else? Attic. Porta potty. God, that'd be miserable. Sitting at a computer. We'll link that to the cubicle idea. Stuck in a tree. Wait, inside a tree has happened. Okay, I'm not sure how many games we can play inside a tree, but maybe. What else? A tent? Sure, I could see a tent. Bathroom stall. A trunk. Trunk could definitely work. I think I've seen at least one movie where the main character's stuck in the trunk most of it. I think it was The Call with Halle Berry. Has one of the main characters in a trunk almost the entire time. A cave. Yep, cave can work, but cave's not tiny. A cave would only be tiny if we could barely move in it. Spaceship, escape pod. Escape pod's pretty good. Titanic, submersible. Okay, submarine. Submarine can be great because you don't need to show that much of what's happening outside, and that can sometimes be better left to the imagination. That was the movie Deeper that mostly took place in the submarine. Did that get made, or was that just a script I read? A locker. Okay, yeah, a movie where you get stuffed into a locker by bullies, and you have to. I'm not even sure what would be going on in the school. Under a kitchen table. That's cute. Not really a box, but I'll write it down just because I haven't seen it before. An oubliette in a dungeon. Okay, yep, dungeon. So like the solitary. We'll call that solitary confinement because I guess it's like the medieval version of that. A genie lamp. That's cute. I mean, it doesn't really strike me as a horror thriller concept producers would go for or sell in this current year because that feels too fantasy-ish for them for the most part. And I'm just trying to like preempt the notes you would get, but it maybe. I don't even know what that would look like. Does it look like a hookah lounge or something? Inside an Iron Maiden. That's fascinating. Wouldn't you kind of be dead, though? Maybe, yeah, okay. I'll write it down. Amazon shipping box. Or a cake. Okay. The cake is funny. That's, you mean sort of in the sense of like the stripper that jumps out of the cake sort of thing? Okay, these are great ideas for the tiny box. We can barely move in these. Let's move it up to small box. Let's get ideas for just like a small room, like a prison cell size. Okay, so cargo container or shipping crate. Cargo container. What else we got? My current apartment. Yeah, you're telling me. Classroom, bathroom. Classroom's good. That's like the Breakfast Club we talked about. Bank vault. Yep, I've actually seen at least one haunted bank vault movie, which was pretty cool. Write that down. What else we got? Interrogation room. Yep. Somebody says small house. I'll say cottage, maybe. Cottage or cabin. Garage. Confession booth. That's a good one. That's more tiny. I'll write it down because that's great. There was a movie called The Shave, which was on the blacklist a year or two ago, that almost the entire movie takes place in a barber shop with one character doing a shave for the other. And I think he does tell him a story, and we sort of go into flashbacks, but like I think the entire thing is framed around that one shaving session. Recording studio. Oh yeah, we did that in Pontypool. Did you see that? That was a cool way to take the radio station and sort of exploit that for various games within the horror premise. That tied very well to the kind of basics. I would, if you haven't seen Pontypool and you like movies like this, check that one out. Lifeboat, that's fun. Life of Pi. Elevator. Yeah, I've seen a couple elevator movies. Devil being one of them. Helps if the devil's in the elevator. A tank, or an RV, or a server room. Great. Okay. Yeah, vehicles can work well too. Let's move up to medium. And because I just said vehicles, I'm just going to say train. A train is like a lovely contained environment, isn't it? Train to Busan, we have your... I was going to say snakes on a train, but that wasn't it. It was on a plane. So, automated robotic homeless shelter. Okay, I'll say homeless shelter. The idea of it being robotic and automated, that maybe is part of the hook. Theater stage. Fun. Or we could say auditorium, maybe. Not many movies would take place entirely just on the stage, though I will say Grand Piano with Elijah Wood does, I think, mostly take place on the orchestra, like in the middle of an orchestra performance. Cinema, that's a good one. I've seen only one horror movie that takes place in a cinema. I believe it was a Dario Argento movie. We would say movie theater, though, not cinema. Plantation roof. A roof could be a cool one. Rooftop. A lot of Dawn of the Dead, the 2004 remake, takes place either in the mall or on the roof of that mall. Corn maze, that's a fun one. We love a corn maze. Farm. Yep, they start. Farm is an exterior, so that's not a contained environment. Let's say a barn or something like that, though. Barn. Remember the walls? We got to keep the walls in place. Strip mall, weed farm. So we did farm already. Strip mall, yeah, could be like maybe an abandoned mall. That could be fun. Well, you said strip mall, so I'll put normal mall under large. Let's move up to large. What are some big environments, but still contained? So we have like multiple stories, multiple sub-locations or sub-rooms. Office building, cruise ship. So we got your Dawn of the Dead, your Belko experiment, and your ghost ship right there. High school, college, yep, we talked about those. Aircraft carrier or factory. Factory could be interesting. Research facility. I'm seeing game show stage. That's more of a medium-sized room. Kind of like, what's it called? Late Night with the Devil. We have haunted house would probably not be a large box unless it was a like classic Gothic mansion. That would definitely be a large box. The Pentagon, yep, government buildings can be very large boxes too. Steam room, theme park. Theme park is good. Space station, okay. We're amping up the budget a little bit. And by a little bit, I mean to the extent that you may not be able to get that one made. Hotel, museum, great. Okay. Night at the museum. All right, so we got a bunch of environments to choose from. And I will suggest to begin with the idea that you can already start brainstorming. Like, I'm going to be talking, you can open up your own Google Doc and start writing stuff down, copying and pasting, ideas from this as needed. Like, if these help or inspire you in some way, then you can use one of these to draw from in terms of your movie premise. So I would say to begin with, remember we're sticking with horror, thriller, and action. So you can pick any one of those. And think of how those different genres might play out in these different locations, right? Think of what would the threat be? How could the killer stalk or torment you in this location? How could you escape from them? What games would exist in that space? So I'm going to suggest you start writing stuff down and brainstorming right now. And of course, all throughout this week, you'll be continuing to refine your ideas and getting down to the point where you have a couple that you think are working really well. You can maybe come back next week and pitch them in our next event if you want to. Under the covers, maybe I'll just go through and highlight the ones that I thought were particularly fun and I haven't necessarily seen before. Okay, sensory deprivation tank is fantastic. Somebody should actually do that, and I would look into just make sure no one has done that already. Under the covers, I loved that. What else we got? Porta potty, I do not love. That is, you don't want to inflict that on the. Obviously, it would not be a gross porta potty if they filmed in it, but it would just be a gross experience for the audience, I feel. Inside a Tree is new, but I just can't think of any games that you could play unless we're doing straight fantasy stuff. Tent, maybe. I feel that the tent, most of the games that could be played in the tent would be based on what you brought along into the tent, rather than based on the tent itself. Though it is kind of fascinating that the tent is somehow keeping you safe from the threat, maybe. So maybe there's something there, but at the end of the day, it's just such a small box that I wonder how much you could actually do in a tent. Trunk, seen it before. Escape pod, interesting, but sort of does verge on that high budget range, because like, what are we? If the escape pod is in transit, then it can't be in transit for that long, right? So it has to eventually make contact with the ground. At which point, is your character still stuck in essentially a booth on the ground? I wonder. Maybe it could work, but I won't highlight it for the moment. The shipping container, maybe. Confession booth, I loved. I'm going to take the shipping container off. All right, so my favorite from the tiny boxes were sensory deprivation tank, under the covers, or the confession booth. The confession booth just has that great kind of like gravity to it, or that built-in kind of character association with like it seems to have an arc already like attached, which I think is just proves that it's a great spot for a story, and I've never seen a movie set in one before. Okay, so there's my favorites there. You start your brainstorm and start your thinking. Let's move into medium, and I'll let you know what I think of or we'll go from small to medium. So we'll start with small. Classroom, we've seen a lot of versions of that, but there's so many games to play in a classroom, it's hard not to love it. Recording studio, I liked. elevator, tank, RV, server room. Maybe there's something in the server room. Maybe there's sort of a sci-fi thriller to be found there. Medium size. We have homeless shelter, game show stage. I like the movie theater because I feel that hasn't been exploited that much. The strip mall, maybe there's something there. Like in the kind of, you have to imagine it would sort of be abandoned, or at least at night though, just to not overload your story with too many high budget elements. In terms of large, we've seen a lot of mall stuff. Office building, we've seen a lot of. Cruise ship, we've seen. I'm going to highlight hotel and government buildings, and maybe research facility could work too, though we've seen a fair amount of that. Okay, so those were just based on a couple factors, based on the availability of the games, based on the freshness and uniqueness of the space, and how often we've seen that sort of thing before. That is kind of what informed my choices here. But obviously, whatever it is that appeals to you and interests you is totally on the table. We have a question on Kick. I'm Turkish. I don't speak English very well. Can you speak slowly? Are you a software developer? No and no. I mean, yes, I can try to speak more slowly, but I am not a software developer. Maybe you're thinking this is a different kind of script. You might be thinking of like programming script. This is based on writing scripts for movies. Okay. JavaScript camp. Yeah, I think there are other servers called things like script camp, so sometimes people do get a little misdirected there. Okay, so hopefully you guys are already starting to think of some locations that you like. Let me just pause for this moment and ask for any hands raised. Maybe somebody wants to share an idea for a location, or ask a question about a location, or share some thought that you have. Anyone want to speak up right now? Go ahead, Luke.
Yeah, I'll share an idea. There is this thing in sort of church youth groups called a lock-in, where you lock the doors and you stay overnight. And I think that's just easily exploitable for a contained horror movie.
It's been done. I've seen it. It's just called the lock-in. It's
okay.
Unbearably bad, though, so maybe that gives you a little leeway. Because
well, if it hasn't been done well, that still leaves me some room.
Yeah, for sure. You just wouldn't be able to call it the lock-in, unfortunately, which is like such a nice, clear version of the title. I will say, I think if I remember correctly, it was a very low-budget movie done by perhaps a faith-based like horror or filmmaker. You know, like it's like a Christian movie that has like themes of. If I remember correctly, like I'm pretty sure. I'm not making this up. I'm pretty sure this is actually how it goes. The kids at the lock-in find a dirty magazine, and as a result, that's why the demons strike. Because like they've sinned.
Oh no!
They've sinned, and now they're being tormented by like ghost demons because of the horrors of their play.
They invited them in, you know. Obviously,
it's true. They deserve everything they get.
Well, I have another religious idea, and that's just a character who's sort of struggling because they're nailed to a cross for the whole movie.
Wow!
And figuring out how to make that work. Just there would have to be another character involved for sure, because they can't really do anything. But
yeah,
it would be an interesting struggle.
127 hours, except with Jesus Christ, our Lord and Savior. It could, yeah. There's a crucified character is interesting. I wonder how that would make sense in a modern day context. But yeah,
I could think of a million ways to make it make sense in a modern context.
Okay, great. Yeah, I like it. Crucified. I guess the question might be, where are they crucified? Like outside? It's usually outside.
Probably in a church. Something, you know, it might be like a fringe or like a cult thing out in the woods, but, you know, I'm imagining a church.
Okay, it could definitely work. I think there's something there. The religious themes will always work in horror thriller. Not so much action all the time, but sometimes, maybe.
Well, sometimes. I guess Boondock Saints was really popular. I didn't quite get it.
I didn't either. I think it's bad, personally, but what are you going to do?
Okay. Willem Dafoe is great, though, in that movie.
True.
But like, everything else, I agree.
That's like a college freshman's favorite movie, is what that
feels like. I was roommates with that college freshman.
Mm-hmm. I think we all were. Okay, yeah, but just a church is a great setting for a contained story. There's actually, weirdly, I can't name that many of them, even though it seems obvious, doesn't it?
Well, Final Prayer is half church, half caves.
Half church, half cave. That should be on the poster. Half church, half cave, all business.
It's got a really memorable ending.
Okay, well, don't spoil it for those in the crowd who haven't seen, I guess.
Yeah.
Anything else you want to ask about or bring up? These are great ideas.
Nope.
Awesome.
That was it.
Thanks, Luke. Anyone else want to raise a hand, suggest a location, take us down the route of an idea that you are working on, something like that? Becky, go ahead.
I kind of have an idea pop into my head. It's not really for kids, so it really involves a kid. So I was thinking about like what I do as a job. So I'm a tutor. And so I kind of had this idea of this tutor who's brought in to tutor this girl who's homeschooled. She's looked after by her uncle. She's got very like behaviour issues, and then things start to get creepy as they go on. So suddenly things start happening, and the tutor's wondering it's to do with the kid. But then as the story goes on, you then find, I imagine, like the midpoint being the tutor suddenly realises that this really big mirror that's in the room that she's tutoring from is actually a two-way mirror, and that the uncle is watching. And then you start to find this kid actually has powers. And by the end, it would be that the kid isn't actually the uncle's kid. He's doing experiments on her. And the tutor has to get out with the kid. The only thing I can't work out is why he'd bother to hire a tutor.
Right.
I love the concept. And you can imagine it being that, like, there had been tutors before. And, you know, she gets hold of one of the previous tutors who's like, just get out of there. You don't know what she's capable of, you know. That kind of...
Sure, could work. I would suggest, if you're wondering why he would hire a tutor, you might ask the question, are the powers linked to her mental abilities in some way? Like, if she were, for instance, able to develop in math, would she get better at using the powers or something like that? Like, maybe if the power is linked to her brain or her brain development, then development could be the key to exploiting the powers further.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Just an idea. I think it works better than, well, legally she has to go to school or whatever, because if he's already doing experiments on a kid, it's like, would the villain care?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, so, but I like the idea that at the end, even though she has got this dangerous ability, you know, the tutor gets the kid out, like, gets her out, you know?
Sure. Also, maybe, I wonder if it would make sense with your setup if you're saying the kid has behavior problems and maybe doesn't really want to be tutored, but the kid requested it herself is an option as well. Like, the kid was going crazy until she's obsessed with learning about, I don't know, she's always watching TV all day and is like, I want to learn more about the world. So it could be that she threatened or maybe even threw a big fit, and like finally the guy was like, okay, if it will make you calm down, one day a week you can bring in your science tutor.
Yeah, I like that.
Could work. It might raise the question, is the kid trying to escape using that tactic, which seems a little advanced for a kid of that age, but I think having it be the kid's idea could actually be an interesting way to take it.
Yeah.
Nice idea so far. I would ask yourself, though, what are the games that we can play in the location? So if we're just in a house, there are lots of games that you can play in a house, but is there a more specific type of house or place that the house is, maybe, or something like that? I wonder.
That's where I was thinking that, you know, she starts to explore and finds that a house has, like, secret rooms, which, again, is easy to find in the UK, like that kind of thing. Right. And, you know, finds science equipment, finds tapes, you know, of, like, recordings and that kind of thing, or finds a computer, it'd be nowadays, but...
Sure.
Otherwise, you know, he would be analog, so none of it gets out.
That's possible, yeah. Doesn't want it to get hacked or something. Mm-hmm.
The other crazy spitball idea I had was, because you said cinema, and I used to work in a cinema, and I love the idea of filming in a cinema, especially if it's like one of the old ones, and I know that I'd get permission to film in one. I'm like, what if it's, you know, kids at a cinema, and basically you've got the, you know, it's like the change from it being old film to it now being CD, but then you've got the old projectionist, and then I thought, actually, no, what if the projectionist is a ghost, and in order to move on, he needs to finish filming his greatest, like, masterpiece or something, and the kids help him, like, finish his masterpiece. Just a fun little throwaway kids one.
Could work, yeah. If I remember correctly, I think I read a Joe Hill story, a short story about a ghost projectionist. I might be remembering it wrong. That I would Google his collection, 20th Century Ghosts, if you're curious. But yeah, there's definitely something in the cinema. The projectionist is an interesting character. The space of the cinema offers a lot of possibilities, especially when you consider all the ways that you can link what's going on to the movies, right? Like you can always do serial killer who targets people in secluded showings and kills them in the same style as the movie they're watching, or something like that, right? Kind of like that Scream kind of thing. Go ahead.
For me, the cinema feels more magical. My earliest childhood memories were sitting up with the projectionist in the cinema. That was awesome.
Sure.
And I think it'd be more like a lower budget of like Hugo. Obviously with him it's all like the film stuff, but
sure,
that kind of love for yeah, I don't know, I'd have to think about it, but
all good.
I could go really dark with
That's
cinema.
where my mind goes. I mean, I want the characters are coming out of the movies to kill people or something like that, personally.
Well, I know that we used to do this game where it was like to make sure we searched everywhere if people got if the fire alarms went off, right, we'd have to go and search and make sure all the screens were empty to make sure everyone was out of the building. And so every Sunday after our staff meeting, we used to play a game where half of us would be trying to find and the other half would be trying to hide. And I can tell you, we got the most obscure places you can hide in a cinema that you would never be found. I think I only ever got found twice, and I worked there for 5 years.
It's a great place to be stalked, you could say.
It's also a great place to store bodies.
Right. True.
Until you're ready to get rid of them, like after the night shift.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely.
Store them in there and then put them in the bins afterwards, ready to be taken out.
Yeah, bury them in popcorn. Easy.
Yeah.
Thanks for these ideas, Becky. Let's ask who would like to raise a hand and talk about their ideas. I see one hand raised. Oh, it went back down. Never mind. Oh, Arthur, go ahead.
Hello.
Hi.
Hello. I just thought of this idea, actually. A horror thriller that's contained within a dark ride.
A what?
A dark ride.
A dark ride? What is that?
You know the rides where you just sit in a car and they just that you travel through scenes and stuff?
Oh, like an amusement park ride that goes through tunnels and things, like, what's it called? Space Mountain? Is that one of them?
No, think of like Jurassic Park.
Oh, okay. So the ones that are like a tour, like, sort of like a guided tour almost, that shows you different scenes, or sometimes they take you past like animatronics that are doing a little show or something like that. Okay, that could work. Those are usually not that long, is the only thing, but maybe you could get your characters stuck on one somehow, or stuck within the. I mean, House of a Thousand Corpses features a bit of this. Yeah, maybe it could work. The thing with journeys is that the journey has to be like a movie's 90 minutes, right? So that's why that was the problem with the escape pod idea, is that, well, the escape pod's only going to be doing its thing for a short time, or if you are doing a movie set in, any kind of vehicle that is going from one place to another, which in this case that is kind of a vehicle, right? You just have to consider the length of how long that journey would actually be and how many games you could play in that time. So I could see some possibilities there, especially if your characters have to get off the ride and maybe get back on it at some point, perhaps. Maybe there's some supernatural reason we have to do that. Yeah, I could see possibilities there.
Yeah. I can make it supernatural and the ride is like longer than normal.
That could work too. Mm-hmm. Could be cool. Might be an interesting way to sort of, if you have like a clown that gets knocked into a coma or something like that, and then the movie takes place like in his mind as he's trying to like escape, something like that could use that sort of surreal, distorted circusy theme parky imagery in a neat way.
Yeah, dark ride.
Dark ride. I've never heard it called that before, but that's a good title.
I know. Lots of amusement park goers call it dark rides.
Okay, cool. Well, yeah, great idea. Great basis for a movie. I think it could definitely happen.
It's a great. I just don't know what the plot going to be, though.
Mm-hmm. Well, I would start by deciding horror, thriller, or action. I think it sounds like you're going with horror to begin with, but you could explore thriller as well. So you have supernatural possibilities and you have mundane possibilities. You can go either way. I would write some stuff down. Write down like 10 options. Write down serial killer. Write down haunted ride. Write down just like the first 10 things that come to your head and see what clicks.
Okay. Yeah, I'll do that.
Great. Thanks for bringing up this idea. Anyone else? Let's see. I'm going to scroll through the chat and see what great ideas people have had for us. Let's see. Horror thriller at a Denny's. Yeah, it's about the manager and a customer just refuses to leave the all-you-can-eat buffet. He's like, it says all-you-can-eat. It's 24/7. You can't make me leave. That would be truly horrific. A customer keeps coming back. A bunch of teens trapped in a dark ride hiding from a slasher. Could do that. I think that we did a pretty similar one to that. I do forget what it was called, because there were like 2 or 3 kind of like amusement park serial killer movies that came out around the same time. But within the past 10 years, that has been a bit. So look into that. The all-you-can-eat buffet eats you. Okay, a horror movie set at the Golden Corral. Maybe UK people don't have Golden Corral, but it's a cheap buffet that I went to too much as a child. Inside a whale. There's something lovely and biblical about that. May not come across as very cost friendly to producers, but it is a fun space to be in. Death buffet, the buffet that eats. What else you guys got? A friendship house for the lock-in idea. That's lovely. I'm going to bring that up. Something about Friendship House is just a great title too, isn't it? Look at that. Something about that doesn't look so friendly. What else you guys got? I'm gonna scroll up. Glamping horror thriller. There's something fun there. That's a good idea. Glamping as the sort of centerpiece. Oh, it feels a little like a horror comedy. Maybe it's a horror comedy, but fun spot to be in, the kind of like fancy RVs and stuff. Hiding from a Yeti. I see someone suggesting. There we go. Yetis, kind of underexplored characters. A yurt. Yeah. You know what? Yeah. The yurt feels good. Let's see. Red light district room. What is that exactly? Red light district room. Oh, like the room where you go for like a private stripper type of show? Okay. Yep. That could work as well. I could see us easily being either character too, like the dancer who's maybe trapped there, or the customer is the evil one, or you could go the other way too. Evil stripper. I don't know. Evil stripper, guys, make it happen. Church setting, but the basement. Yeah, I think that's traditionally called the Undercroft, but maybe I just read too many Gothic novels. Maybe it's not called that anymore. Post-apocalyptic bunker. Yeah, bunker's a great setting. 10 Cloverfield Lane was a really clear example of like the post-apocalyptic bunker contained thriller. Glampire, Nacho suggests this. Okay, now you found the hook. Glampire is really good. That does sound like a horror comedy set at a campground. Maybe about vampires that travel from campground to campground. That's nice. Glampire is good. A stripper slasher who kills people with the pole. Like she carries it around and like spikes them with it, like Pumpkinhead does, or like what's his name, Michael Myers or Jason does in the second movie when he gets that big fence spike. Maybe. Under the sea killer filled building, someone is trying. Wait, under the sea killer filled building, someone is trying to escape. Yeah, flooding or flooded rooms or buildings can work great. I was pitching for a while a true story that was, or I was not pitching a true story, pitching on an adaptation of a true story, which was set in a prison in Hurricane Katrina that got flooded, and all the inmates had to work together to escape. That really happened. Is an amazing article that I read about it. But when I was pitching it, apparently somebody else had the rights and was also pitching it, so I didn't get anywhere with it. But I still think if you can find that article, you can read it and check it out. I think it was Vice. But one of the most harrowing, real, true, like, it's a real-life contained thriller, basically. And it has that awesome element of the prisoners have to kind of come together and work together to escape, and that whole element to it works really well, too. It's like the Poseidon Adventure, but set in a prison in a real-life place only 20 years ago. Okay, pawn shop. That's fun. I kind of like the pawn shop idea. A lot of robbery type thrillers do take place in one sort of store or location, like Your Lucky Day, which I mentioned before. it can be tough to maintain that tension for the entire time. That movie actually did it quite well. Thriller horror where the main character becomes the size of an ant but isn't Ant-Man. Oh yeah, I've experimented with this before, the idea of like Honey, I Shrunk the Kids, but horror. Great idea. You're in a canoe on a lake in the middle of nowhere. That's working. It kind of reminds me of that Creepshow 2 segment, which is based, I think it's called The Raft, which is based on the Stephen King short story with some kids that are on one of those floating wooden pallet things that is sometimes in the middle of a pond or lake that the swimmers will, like, I don't know, rest on. Maybe it's a buoy. And while they're there, they are attacked by essentially a big ooze, like an intelligent carnivorous algae that lives in the water. Doesn't sound that scary, but actually it's pretty gross and scary. Honey, I Enlarged the Kids. I think they did that in that same franchise. I think they made them kaiju size in one of them, didn't they? Blew Up the Kids, I think it was what it was called. Yeah. Laser tag. There you go. Laser tag is a great contained horror or thriller premise. It does a little bit. I feel like in order to really exploit the games in the premise, it almost has to be supernatural, because otherwise, like if we're just in a thriller world, what can we actually do with the laser guns besides temporarily blind someone? Would be my first question. But yeah, laser tag arena is a great idea, or paintball or airsoft could also really work too. A card game tournament where losing means death. That's a great one, Arthur. It's like Yu-Gi-Oh meets Squid Game. Wonderful. Mini golf course. Okay, yeah. I mean, it makes me wonder, why are we still playing the golf game once the scary situation has started? But if it's supernatural, again, maybe the ghost of a golfer has roped us into this game, and now we need to win it in order to survive. Something like that. Something set in a pub. Yeah, I've definitely seen that one quite a lot. I will reference a Spanish movie set in a pub from a couple years ago that I liked. If I can remember the title, it was set during, I believe, a contagion or outbreak, obviously a pre-COVID movie, but I think it's just called The Bar. It's a Spanish movie called The Bar, which I thought actually was quite good. An Arborium. Go ahead.
Can I just clarify that? I was replying to Pollock's thing about the card game where you can't ever leave. And I said, the card game where if you lose, you die. And I was thinking I'd make it a pub setting, but it's like a supernatural pub, and that's where the devil is, and that's why, if you win, you get extra years added to your life or something.
Could be work.
But if you lose,
could work.
You die.
Also, if we're in a pub, I mean, you have all kinds of games in a pub. Like, pub games are a whole genre of thing, right? You have the darts, you have the billiards, you have the, is it called cornhole? They often play at pubs here in the U.S. So there's all kind. If you could, maybe find like a Squid Game with pub games, something like that's fun. A pool. Becky also mentions we just saw Night Swim, which was a pool-based horror, so it can be done, unless you were talking about billiards pool. I will also say there was a Blacklist script centered on a pool recently too. Darts would be interesting in a Squid Game pun movie, says Romy. Yeah, it would end up like that scene in Shaun of the Dead, where they're trying to kill the zombie with darts, but they keep hitting their friends instead. Aqua Slash, a water slide horror. Yeah, maybe water park. Maybe there's something in water park. That feels like a good evolution of, or slight mutation of the theme park idea, water park. So there might be something there.
There was that film, I imagine it could be done quite low budget, where he goes into a cardboard box and then it sort of turns into a maze of like loads of cardboard boxes.
Dave made a maze.
Yes. Or we could do a similar concept to that, but with the man stuck in a tree.
Okay, so like the tree sort of has this liminal, never-ending, like pocket dimensional quality.
Yeah, it's magical, and he's got to go through this magical wood, falling through basically tunnels or whatever to get out. But it's like it'd be easy to build on a set because it's just the same like wooden bit, but you'd have maybe different creatures or noises or things like that.
Okay, maybe. I think that it wouldn't sell because it's too kind of like fantastical-ish and like it feels like a fantasy story rather than a contained horror. But if I can maybe suggest the idea of being up in the trees, I do see something there. Especially if we can maybe, you know how in some parts of the woods there will be like a series of linked platforms with bridges between them or things like that? maybe used by hunters or maybe used by people hiking or like they're up in the canopies basically. Something about just the canopy is something like that does feel like an interesting kind of setup for a horror or thriller. Maybe there's something there.
Yeah.
Like you touch the ground, you die. That kind of thing. You know what I mean? Like the ruins.
The ground is lava.
The ground is lava. Yeah. I did talk about how every children's game has been exploited for a horror thriller. Why not? Why not the ground is lava? People are mentioning Cube in the chat as well. Yeah, very easy to make that movie considering there was only one cube set they had to make for the whole thing. Is there a horror where gravity is reversed? As the Hook? Not that I know of. Everyone who's outside would just fall into space, wouldn't they? I'm not sure exactly what we'd do with the idea, but I can't name one off the top of my head. Perhaps. Romy tells us a sensory deprivation tank idea I had was a person enters one innocently and they wake up and they become an oracle in another universe. The kind that float in water. Oh, okay, kind of like the precogs from Minority Reports. Maybe. That doesn't quite feel like we've contained it, though, if you have now gone to another universe and, like, it would... I feel like with the sensory deprivation thing, part of the fun of that idea is or part of the whole sensory deprivation tank idea is that you sort of hallucinate, or that you kind of... Especially, I mean, if you can have your characters taking drugs, that can usually add a whole other layer to your movies, too. But, like, it feels like we can't leave the tank, though. I wonder how much is there. Go ahead, Remy.
Hello.
Hi.
Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, great. Okay, sorry. Basically, my idea, though, like the one that I earlier was, I rewatched the Deep Space Nine pilot recently, so it's a bit inspired by that. But essentially, the idea is that like the protagonist going into the sensory deprivation tank is doing it as part of like a bigger wellness sort of journey, right? And is at this wellness center, and it's like we find out that she's quit a really stressful job, like lost someone close to her, like is just going through a lot. And so once she's in the sensory deprivation tank, and the thing that I think the most interesting part about those tanks is that people really freak the fuck out when they're in them. Like some people really can't handle being alone with no sound. So I would play that up, and at first she's freaking out, and she's like crying, and she's just sort of like rambling and ranting to herself, and she's just sort of getting a lot of things off her chest. Eventually she calms down. She's like takes some deep breaths. She starts to get into this meditative trance, and then when she wakes up, she's actually like being held in a very similar type of tank, but there's all these aliens around her, and it's like an alien probe. It turns into an alien probe type of movie. And I guess the connection to Deep Space Nine, and again, this is where it came from, is that like they're trying to better understand how humans work. And in trying to better understand how humans work, she's basically able to sort of process all of that trauma, right? And understand things that she never really thought before.
Well, that's an interesting internal arc, but it doesn't quite sound like it contained like sci-fi thriller premise. I think the version that would be most attractive to producers would be you have your character get stuck in the tank and can't get out. You know what I mean? Like something that simple, that straightforward. And I wonder, like, what games could you play? Obviously, having a cell phone would be a game changer in that situation. The movie Buried is a little bit, like, it would just be a little bit like Buried, except you're floating on a layer of water, right? So I would. Go ahead.
By the way, you can't really bring your cell phone into the tank.
I guess you can't. Yeah, I guess you can't.
You can't.
Right.
No, I've done them before. You really you have like a little locker where you lock up everything. And then once you're in the tank, like you're completely alone.
Yeah, it does limit the games that we can play to some extent, but the majority of the games that you're playing might be in your character's mind in this story, perhaps. I don't quite know. It's tricky because there's a lot of limitations, and that would probably say why there hasn't been a movie like this done yet, which we always have to ask that question. Like, if it's so obvious, why hasn't it been done? And in this case, possibly just because the games aren't apparent enough. You might have to sort of really think what you could do in there, or like the possibilities that you can, the fun that you can have without leaving the tank. It's tough, right? But it is a great space for a story.
Yeah, when I first started thinking, I was like, if there's just a lot of stuff happening outside of the tank that like she's kind of experiencing and then can't get out, it's like that could only take you so far, right? Like at some point she has to get out to be able to just like, I don't know, survive, right? Outside of just the tank, but then we're no longer in the tank.
Yeah,
so
you might want to consider widening the box a little bit, maybe to the room full of tanks or to the center or something like that.
Right.
If you, for instance, have a group of, let's do almost like a teen scream, there's a bunch of teenagers at one of these retreats, they all get into tanks and they can, I don't know if you can actually, I know you're not supposed to talk to each other, but if you could at least hear each other, it would help. And then let's just say killer traps them all in their pods. Or somebody's in the tank and they hear a murder happen. And then the killer realizes that they're in there and now has to decide what to do with them, right? Like, I do see options here. Not sure exactly what to zero in on, but good space to be in. Good thinking. We're at the end of... My bad, we talked right at the same time. Did you want to finish your thought?
I was just saying, I'll keep thinking about this a bit more and see if I can talk anything else.
Cool.
But yeah, thank you.
No problem. Thanks for these great thoughts. We are at the end of our time. Unfortunately, we do have to wrap up because I have to go to a separate event. Thank you guys so much for coming to this, and I hope that you had some good ideas. Remember, keep working on those ideas, and next week you'll have an opportunity to come back and tell us about them and pitch them and get more tips and suggestions based on whatever it is that you chose. We have these classes every weekend, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. We have TV boot camp Fridays 6 to 8. We have features, that's right now, Sundays 11 to 1. And we also have novels Saturdays from 12 to 2 with lots of topics, workshops, and events like this. So if you guys found something fun to work on here today, then we hope to see you for more of these. I'll just leave you with the list of upcoming stuff. Here we go. So keep at it, keep working on these things. Come back next week and follow up. Hope my mic held up throughout this entire thing. I do see some levels going up and down. All right, and we'll see you guys here at your next Script Camp class or event. Have a great rest of your weekend.